Well, we are starting a new sermon series titled Be Rich, or How to Be Rich. And I just want to, in case you're skeptical, just take some things right off the top. This is not a prosperity gospel type sermon. I don't believe in that kind of theology. So, it's not going to be if you believe the right sort of things or pray the right sort of prayer, you're going to go home and voila, there's going to be a Mercedes in your parking lot. If we could do that, we would do that, but it just doesn't work that way. And this series is going to go on for 4 weeks, and it's not going to be a 4-week sermon series about tithing to the church, because who would want to listen to that? And I wouldn't want to preach that either. So it's not going to be that. It's going to be bigger than that. It's going to be better than that. And if some of this talk about money and the things that revolve around wealth and money makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, I'm with you. Quite honestly, I'd much rather do the customary, one-drop stewardship, Sunday sermon and then just be done with it. But the reason we're going to talk about this for so long is because Jesus spent a lot of time talking about wealth and money. And if you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, the accounts of Jesus' life, you'll see that he had all sorts of important and insightful and helpful things to say about money. And actually, Jesus wasn't the only person to talk about it. The Apostle Paul, he also talked about money. And in fact, when he was writing to his protege, Timothy, he said this. He said, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides." In this scripture, we're going to carry this scripture through all 4 weeks, and I'm going to spend some more time unpacking this particular verse and the verse that comes after it. But for today, I just want to draw your attention to the last 4 words. God, who richly provides. We just finished a sermon series titled Starting Point, and I talked about it a little bit differently, but you could say that the starting point of Christian theology is God's generosity. The starting point of Christian theology is God's generosity. You might remember from the last sermon series, religion is all about D-O, what you do, but Christianity, the gospel, is about D-O-N-E, what God has done. It's God's generosity that starts things off for us. In fact, there's a verse that some of you have seen at baseball games. They hold up John 3:16, or you've seen it on bumper stickers. "For God so loved the world that he," now say it with me, "gave his one and only son," right? You probably knew that before you came here. And the reason that this is put up at baseball games and other places is because in this verse, many Christians believe that the essence of our theology and the character of God is captured. That God is a giving God, generous, no strings attached sort of giving God. And what that means for you and what that means for me is that if you buy into this theology that, we're created in an image of God, then if God is a generous giver, then at the core of who you are is also a generous giver. That at the core of who you are is there's a generosity. That's why when you think about at the end of your life, if people are talking about you and what you would want them to say about you, that probably all of us in some sort of way would like for people to say, "Hey, that person, Elaine was a really generous person. Ron, he just gave and just generous with everything." We want to hear these sorts of things about ourselves because there's something in you and there's something in me that wants to be generous, that wants to be known as a generous person, and that takes satisfaction in being generous. I had a dinner party on Friday night, if you could call it that. It was my mom, my sister, my brother-in-law, and my little girl. Not much of a dinner party, but at the end of dinner, they were all like, "Hey, this was really, really good," which felt great because, the last time that I had a dinner party, they were just like, "Thanks for coming over for dinner." Because last time I think I burnt the chicken, and this time around, I got it right and I was able to serve them, and it felt just good to put on a dinner for my loved ones, to be generous. And you know what I'm talking about. In you and in me is a need for generosity. And it's because we're created in the image of our God, who is a no-strings-attached, generous God. Now, the no-strings-attached generosity, this was the hallmark of the first century church. This is what the church was known for and what allowed a knockoff Jewish cult that had no property, didn't have much money, didn't have much influence, was actually persecuted and under attack. This is what allowed the early church to move and for that gathering to grow. It was their no strings attached generosity. And for generation after generation, Christians or followers of the way, they would engage in this no strings attached generosity, just giving to those who need it, not requiring anything in return. And the church continued to grow and thrive until 313, when Emperor Constantine, he issued the Edict of Milan. And all of a sudden, Christianity was no longer a banned or a persecuted religion, because now all religions in the Roman Empire were made legal. And so Christianity was able to kind of come out of the shadows and come into a full expression. And now it did begin to have property. Now it did begin to have some influence in society. And then about 25 years later, Emperor Julian came into power, and he loved pagan religion. He wanted to bring the Roman Empire back to the religion of his ancestors. And so he began to fund and support pagan religion, pagan temples and the old Roman and Greek gods and all that sort of thing. And it doesn't go very well despite the full support of the emperor. And he's frustrated. And we have this document that has survived history, that is a letter that he writes to some of these pagan priests, and it's just an exceptional piece of history. And he says this, he says, those impious Galileans, which is what he called the Christians, because they were from Galilee primarily, those impious Galileans support not only their poor, but ours as well. How can we compete with these Galileans, these Christians, these guys and gals who are engaging in this no strings attached generosity? If there's anything that our church could be known for in our community, it would be this kind of no strings attached generosity. Because it is what is so compelling about our faith tradition. When people have given without any strings attached. Now, one of my favorite stories of the New Testament that comes in the book of Acts, like right after Jesus has died, been resurrected, and ascended again to heaven, and the church is getting going, and Peter's going out and preaching, and there's a little bit of growth. The story about this guy, his name's Joseph from Cyprus. This is in Acts 4. He comes along, and we're told that he sells a piece of property. And he brings the money that he gets from selling that piece of property, and he just goes here. He gives it no strings attached to the apostles, to the leaders of the church. And this, he's just one of many people that did this, but we capture him in the story of the book of Acts, and they give him a nickname after he does this. And his nickname is Barnabas. Barnabas means son of encouragement. Now, I think that this is really cool. Because many times when somebody gets up and they start talking about generosity, our minds go immediately to where? Money, right? Yeah, that's part of it, but it's bigger than that. It's better than that. Barnabas here, who engages in a pretty extraordinary form of financial generosity, he gets the nickname son of encouragement. Not son of giving, but son of encouragement. Because you know what else it means to be a generous person? To be generous in your goodwill to other people. To be generous and believing the best about them. Barnabas, who I'll just call Barney because I think that's funnier. Barney, he's the kind of guy that shows up to the party and everybody's excited because Barney walks in and he's like, hey, did you get a new haircut? That looks great. Hey, that jacket looks great on you, Chewy. I mean, you look fantastic, Hey, I heard about your work. How's that going? Hey, you have the spirit of a teacher. I just love that about you. He's the kind of person that lightens up the room. You know these kind of people. Son of encouragement, Barney, right? Everybody loves to be around this kind of person. So when we think about generosity, it's more than just financial generosity. It's full circle. And when it's expressed in all these forms, it's very, very compelling and powerful. Now, where do these guys get all this? Well, what's behind this? And, of course, it's the teachings of Jesus. And Jesus, he taught things like this. He said, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even the sinners, the selfish people, the self-involved, even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good for those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even the sinners do that. And finally, if you lend to those from whom you expect a repayment, what credit is that to you? even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. Right? To which you're sitting there going, yeah, that's kind of common sense, you know? I mean, when I think about generosity, you know, this is somewhat common sense. But what I want you to understand is that throughout history and throughout the world, this understanding of generosity, lending without expecting repayment, isn't all that common. In fact, in the culture that Jesus was teaching about this, it was anything but common sense. This word here, liberalitas, it was printed on most of the coins that the Roman emperors would have made. And they'd all have their own coins made, and they'd print this word liberalitas, which basically meant give in order to receive a favor in return. That's why you give. So the last thing you want to do is give to like poor people or people without influence because they don't have anything to give back. What you want to do is you want to give to somebody that can like give back to you. We say it this way in our culture. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Yeah. And so the emperors, they would go throughout Rome or other cities in the Roman Empire, and they'd take these coins with liberalitas printed on it, and they'd throw it out into the streets, you know, to the populace as if, you know, here, I'm going to give this to you with the expectation that you're going to give me your loyalty and your support and devotion in return. But Jesus, he says, I'm going to redefine what it means to be generous. There's going to be no strings attached generosity. Because that is a reflection of who your God is and who God created you to be. To which we ask, so to what extent are we to be generous like this? And Jesus, he continues to teach, but love your enemies and do good to them and lend without expecting to get anything back. Oh, come on, Jesus. He says, yeah. Lend to your enemies. That's how far I want you to take it. And the early Christians, they did. And Christians throughout history, they did. And this has been one of the most compelling witnesses of the church throughout all of history. Jesus says, when you do it this way, your reward will be great and you will become children of the Most High because He, God, is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Like any good leader, God doesn't ask us to do anything that God hasn't already done. And in fact, we are invited to believe that this is not just kind of a good idea or a clever way to talk about money in a church on Sunday, but maybe this no strings attached generosity is actually at the fundamental reality of life. Maybe this is the essence of our Creator and what really makes the world move, changes lives. This is, I think, maybe the third or fourth point in your bulletins. If you have a pen, circle that, or maybe make a mental note, because this is the big idea, the summary idea of this sermon. Jesus' generosity is do good for those who can't or won't do anything good for you. Do good for those who can't because they don't have the financial resources, they don't have the influence, they don't have the health or the time. Do good for those who can't, or do good for those who won't. Because maybe they're selfish. Because maybe they're dysfunctional. Because maybe they're unaware. Maybe because they don't care anything about you and, you know, they don't care if you're generous, they'll just take. Maybe because they actually see themselves as your enemy. Jesus' generosity, do good for those who can't or won't do anything good for you. This form of generosity is what made the church stand out throughout history. And is what will make a lasting impact in your relationships with one another. And not just financial generosity. Remember Barney? Encouragement, goodwill, believe in the best in people. I mean, in this political world that we're living in, believe in the best, having a generosity of spirit that, yeah, you voted for Hillary, Pastor, and I can't see how you would do that. Or you voted for Trump, and I just can't stand the man, you know, that sort of thing. We get so divided, and I just think that if you voted differently than I do, there must be a character defect in you, and you're just a terrible person. And now I'm written out of my mom's will, you know, like, right? I mean, that's kind of the way that our country is behaving. But what if we were generous people? I really disagree, but I want to understand, and I believe there's good in you, even though you disagree with me. That's real generosity. See, we think about it in terms of this word caritas, or charity. And charity has been something that the church has always practiced. And it's one of the forms of Christian generosity. It's one of the things that, set them apart, made a big difference. And charity is giving to relieve physical or financial distress without expecting anything in return. And that's one part of our mission as a church. I'm going to show you in a minute that I think is bigger than that, it's better than that, but that is one part of our mission of the church, is just this basic form of charity. And the church has been doing that, generation after generation, century after century. And here at Faith, one of the ways that we engage in this form of generosity is through our food and clothing pantry. And what I have to share next with you, I can't take any credit for, because this was happening before I came. And so I just got to kind of jump in and take part in this form of generosity that is happening here at Faith. And the cool part about the food pantry that I didn't expect is that, there's groceries. People come in and we bag up groceries for people and we send it out, and the requirement to receive that aid is pretty low. I mean, basically it's like how much you need, and we give it. But it's better than that. And it's better than the fact that there's clothes there for anybody to take, and we get shipments of clothes, I don't know from where, they come every week, and it's a major thing that Vicky does and some other helpers, just organizing that. But here's the part I love about our food pantry, and this is where it just really captures the full scale of Christian generosity, is that there's a hot meal. And so when people come and they turn in their slip to receive the groceries that they'll take home, and when they're done kind of looking at the clothes that are there, they can get a hot meal and they sit down to eat. And it's better than that, because some of our people, before I got here, they're already sitting down and eating with these guests. And so there was a generosity of financial or physical needs being addressed, but there was also a generosity of spirit being expressed as members of our church and members of our community were sitting down and fellowshipping and listening to and loving on some of the folk in our food pantry. And some of them told me, hey, that felt a little bit different. And some of them would tell you that, hey, that's what drew me to come here and try out our worship service. And then they found the same sort of spirit of generosity at the food pantry. They found it here on Sunday mornings. And as your pastor, to hear that people are walking in our doors and feeling a generosity of spirit, that they're welcome, that people want them here, it doesn't get better than that, folks. I mean, that is amazing. We keep doing that. That's making a difference. Christian generosity, it's compelling. It's far more compelling than our particular theology or our view on things. All that's important. I love theology, but generosity. Because we don't know. You really don't. We don't know what the circumstances are of the people that we help. You don't know what the circumstances are of the person next to you. I love it, because some people, you look at them and it's like they got it all together, and it's as if, their car never even gets dirty, like it washes themselves. Like their lives are just so tightly put together, and you're thinking they have no problems or worries. But I tell you, I've talked to a lot of people. There's always something going on. So we don't know what might be happening. And when you get to know people, when you spend time, your heart grows because you find out some things. Now, when I was a kid, the first place that I came into contact with real kind of disturbing my spirit poverty was on the Appalachian Service Project. And this is what we're going to talk about after church. And there's a lot of ways in which you can have these experiences. Mine just so happened to be with this organization, the Appalachian Service Project. And I was about 14 years old, and I volunteered with a group of people I didn't know because we went to church a town over. And we went and we served a family that I didn't know. And I had a powerful experience, because now poverty didn't just have a statistic, or it wasn't a concept, it was a person, it was a family. And it began to change my heart. And I wrote my college essay about the experience. And I would tell you that the reason I went to seminary was conditioned partly by this experience. And then when I came and I became the youth pastor of a church, you know what I did? I signed us up for Appalachian Service Project. And that first year was kind of tough. They had gone a year or two before, and it didn't work out very well. They weren't very well organized, and there wasn't a whole lot of energy, so I recruited, and we were a little bit of a bigger church, but we ended up taking 21 volunteers, 16 youth, and they had such a good experience, they came back and told their friends, and we celebrated the achievement, and year after year, the youth continued to tell their friends. And 4 years later, we more than doubled in size. We had 45 youth sign up in 2010. And we had a problem, though, because for every 5 youth, you need 2 adults. And we were fully funded in the church. People were writing checks. We actually had a surplus budget, but we didn't have enough adult leaders. And so that year, I got on the phone and I brought my Uncle Ronnie, his 2 boys. I brought my wife, her sister, her cousin. See, who else are we missing? I brought Aunt Sherry, Uncle Mike, who have been here. We ended up having, I think it was 9 people related to me out of the 18 that went on the trip. And boy, in some regards, my favorite trip, because it is so cool to be generous and serve the Lord with your family members. It's a great experience. But I came back, and we celebrated what the youth did, and a few months later, I got up to preach. And I don't like to do this, but I got up, and I'll just be honest, I kind of scolded the congregation for the missed opportunity. Because people were connected with my Uncle Ronnie, people were connected with my Aunt Sherry, my Uncle Mike. I mean, when you go and you live and you work together, it makes a huge difference. It forms those youth. But the problem was Uncle Ronnie, Aunt Sherry, Uncle Mike, they lived in St. Louis and we were in Chicago. And so the benefit of those relationships formed on this mission trip, we were unable to experience that. So I talked about all that, and lo and behold, we had all sorts of adult leaders the next year, and it really began to grow in our community, and these adults, they began to see that, hey, this is not just for the youth. When we give, when we're generous, it's a win-win for us as well. So I could tell you all the stories about what that meant for the church, what that meant for the youth. I mean, I got tons of stories. I'll probably share some of them later. But I want to tell a little bit of Aunt Sherry and Uncle Mike's story. Because these 2, when they came on the trip in 2010, they were just kind of reawakening to their faith. Aunt Sherry was never really a church person. And they came partly on this trip because their nephew begged them. Right? I mean, I was begging people. And they came on this trip. And Aunt Sherry served with me, and we served Greg and Alicia, this family, with a bunch of kids, and we reinforced the foundation on their house. And they lived up in this mountain on this unbelievable incline that was impossible to walk on. And this just changed Aunt Sherry and Uncle Mike. And they ended up coming back and doing things for Greg and Alicia. They bought them a car, and they did other sorts of things. And then after that, they got involved in their church community in St. Louis. And now, and I mean this with love, they're the kind of relatives at Thanksgiving dinner or whatever that just talk about their church. They're on fire for the gospel and doing risky things and transforming their community. And they would tell you that generosity, not just financial, but of spirit, of time, of energy, changed them for the better. It's win-win with God. It's win-win. When you engage in God-driven generosity, not guilt-driven generosity, not because, there's a need and you're sad and it's emotional. And, I could get up here with my microphone and tell you emotional stories and capitalize upon that, but there's something way better than that. It's this God-driven generosity that you know that when you give to those who can't or won't return, that God is going to do something. And that God will benefit the receiver of your generosity, but God always benefits the giver as well. This is why we're spending 4 weeks on this topic. Because generosity, money, all this sort of stuff is very concrete. When you get out, ready to commit your time to go on a mission trip or be part of a ministry or spend time with somebody, when you get out the checkbook, all that theology and good Bible study, it kind of just fades away, and you have this very stark decision and choice. And depending on what you do, you grow. It's about growing as a disciple of Jesus. And I just want to tell you, congratulations. Congratulations. You came today, didn't you? You took a step, and your hearts in some sort of way are open up to the movement of God. And I don't want to say it just is in this moment. I'm sure it's at many places in your life and throughout many years, but you are already part of this movement of no strings attached generosity that's been transforming the world, that's been wakening spirits back up and turning people into incredible forces for good in their communities. And you're part of that just by being here today. Congratulations. Next week, you can't miss it. Because we're going to talk about really weird, strange, rich people. And it's going to be hilarious. Because wealth has side effects. And we're going to talk about all the crazy things that rich people do, And then after that, our brother Chewy, who last time he preached, and I'm still a little bit upset about this, last time he preached, he got a round of applause. You guys never clap for me. I'm just kidding. Please don't clap. They wanted you to sit up. And this is going to be engaging, and this is going to be good. And invite your friends. Everybody needs to hear this message. We need to talk about this sort of stuff. And congratulations, you took the first step. If you allow me to, I'd like to pray for you. We talk about generosity and money, and resources, time, not because we're comfortable doing so. In fact, it makes us all a bit uncomfortable. But we talk about it because Jesus talked about it. Because your Son and our Savior knew that this issue, it can either help us to be an incredible blessing on those around us and towards ourselves, or it can divide us and harm us. So God, I thank you that your Spirit moved today. And I ask that you would just touch each person here, that they might know how generous of a God you are, and might experience the joy that comes from living into your image. In Christ's name, amen.